Mic testing. Mic testing. Huh?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The presenters and the panel discussants, please come forward to the podium. And also make sure to wear masks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Igipo, President of ACI, and I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of ACI. Because of the COVID-19 that we had a hard time putting together today's event, but thanks to the members of the organizing committee that we were able to put together today's online webinar. And I would also like to thank all the presenters and discussants today for your contribution. And this year marks the 10th year of the annual conference of AASN, and it's a venue for having a discussion on the meaning of art in this region. And for the first time this year that we are co-hosting that 2020 annual conference together with the C-Lab. So it's a very meaningful. Distinguished guests, the world is suffering from COVID-19 pandemic, and which is unprecedented. This global pandemic is having a great impact on the many different areas across the world. And because of the lockdown and the shutdown and the social distancing, the many cultural and the artistic organizations had to shut down, and the cultural events had to be called off or put off. And the artistic ecosystem, some of them had to close down, so the artists are now having hard time. But the arts always is being born out of crisis, and artists around the world will not let the guard down, will find the alternative and find the solutions to this. So today we will be discussing that alternatives and that solution and the art has in responding to the COVID-19. And hopefully that today's the 2020 annual conference of AASN will serve as a meaningful venue for us to discuss the solutions and show us the directions for the future. Thank you.
So we have just heard of welcoming address, and we will now begin the 2020 ACC Art Space Network Forum, and this is going to be the part 2. And my name is Park So-hyun. I'm going to serve as moderator of this session. So we invite the In part one, we heard of the opinions of public institutions because already 10 months have passed since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. So that many art and cultural institutions in the Asia Pacific regions took lots of blow. And we are going to take a different perspective in the second part. So we are going to take the perspective of artists. So the theme of session 2 is art resilience for artists and by artists. So we are going to involve artists from the field to see what kind of challenges and difficulties they have faced in the field. So we will directly listen to the voices of artists. So it was very difficult to arrange this event. So I'd like to introduce the participants today. Sitting right next to me is the keynote speaker, Professor Kim Hee-young of Kookmin University. Thank you so much for coming. And sitting next to her is Kang Na-kyung, CEO of artist-run space Setangrang, located in Jeju Island. And sitting next to Kang Na-kyung is 서상호, CEO of alternative space named Open Spaceship. And sitting next to Seo Sang-ho is independent planner Im In-ja, running a bookstore. And also we are joined by another independent planner, Im Jong-un. Thank you so much for coming. And lastly, we have as panel discussant Jang Young-ju. She is an author. I believe that now you are giving such a big round of applause because we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic situation and we can feel more than ever because under normal situations we would have faced a large audience. But in this hall, I can see camera equipment with a very small audience. Actually, this room is full of staff members. So this is unprecedented situations in the corona pandemic era. And all of us here in this conference hall are wearing facial masks. And we will now begin session 2 of this forum. I'd like to invite Professor Kim Hee-young of Kookmin University to deliver keynote speech.
Good afternoon, everyone. For today's forum, thanks for inviting me as the keynote speaker in the morning that we have heard the C-Lab's presentation and discussion, and that theme is somehow correlated with the theme that we have for this afternoon. And it is my privilege that I can be part of this discussion. And I will be reading out the presentation papers that I prepared. In 2020, people from all regions and from all walks of life are going through a time that they have never experienced before due to the COVID pandemic. They have to worry about the potential virus infection, but they also have to be concerned about the social, economic, cultural, and artistic and educational suffering because of the limitations that they have in their daily lives due to social distancing as a countermeasures. Although there is no significant change in information distribution or communication within the digitalized environment, the isolation is being enforced in a human environment. Of course, the daily activities that were repeated are almost completely stopped, and the great flow of our society is in a situation where it seems to be have stopped. However, at the present time of experiencing an unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we're experiencing the unprecedented disconnection and isolation as it is forced to minimize the human contact for survival. At this time, where the end of COVID pandemic cannot be predicted, our lives are expected to be very different from those we have experienced before COVID-19. So we have to ask a new question, and everyone is anxious and what art can do and how art should be understood and how art can be needed in the future and how art should be understood and whether the art will continue to be needed and how and what to prepare for the changes that will occur after the COVID-19. And this forum, under the theme of the ResiliArt, for artists and by artists, is an important opportunity for us to think about this question. We are to reflect on the trajectory of the modern era, which is developed by acknowledging the knowledge that relies heavily on the highly developed technological cultures and prioritizes rationalities. There's no going back to the time before the COVID-19. So it is not a time that we wait until that we can go back to the time before the COVID-19. It's a time for us to make a new changes. So in the period like this, we have to propose a new direction that will restore the individual's inner strength through artistic creativity and develop a sense of community and sense of solidarity through creation based on an open attitude. The pandemic has caused the isolation and chaos and devastation. So I would like to suggest that through creative power of individuals that we have to restore the individual's inner strength and we can develop our imagination and creativity and develop the solidarity through art. Speed has been a weapon of rapid development, but that is also the case for the spread of virus, and we're incapacitated in front of the unprecedented situation of the COVID pandemic. And the weapon that used to dominate the world is now pointing at us. We need to overcome, and we hope to overcome this with the development of medical technology, but there's no guarantee of a quick solution as expected. The spread of COVID-19 is analyzed as a result of excessive human desire to dominate and possess. Global issues such as global warming has been continuously raised due to natural development and industrial development. Critical studies are being conducted on Anthropocene, a geological period in which humans dominated the global environment. And these discussions have great implications for looking at the COVID pandemic. In times of sudden pause, we neglect the order of coexistence with nature and look back on the process of human-centered domination of the environment. So it is necessary to listen to the comments of scholars explaining that the COVID pandemic, due to the self-cleaning action of the natural ecosystem, occupied as the subject of domination. It is time for us to reflect on what was the development for and what future the result of development will lead us to. So the art can show us the new future. So that's what we need to do at the moment. The experiences that we have, and that will help us and become the rationale for the defining the term, the contemporaneity. That with the existing measures that we cannot continue to survive in the future, that's very important for us to understand the present. So recognition of this issue is very important to an understanding of the present. In the proud modern that has developed rationally, the development for a better future, that is the development-oriented view, that today would develop more than yesterday and tomorrow than today was the driving force. However, from a modernist perspective, differences and variation that hinder or delay the development tend to be excluded in order to maximize effective development. And it is recognized that this modern view of history, understanding of time, is increasingly distant from explaining the changes that have been experienced since the end of 20th century. So therefore, the term the contemporary, which embraces the various reflections on the present, has recently replaced the concept of modern. Contrary to the modern time that can be predicted according to the normative criteria, the contemporary time is discontinuous due to the repetition of the present time in which daily life progresses. No meaningful outcome is predicted. Contemporaneity, pay attention to the uncertainty of our lives living in the contemporary and contradictory present. Therefore, it is difficult to understand the contemporary within the modernist framework of generalizing the norms of the past. Contemporaries in which unpredictable time persists are distinguished from the normative modern times and are sometimes discussed as an uncertain and unhistoric negative concepts. So contemporaneity simply means more than just now and here we live in. Differences and contradictions that coexist in our daily lives collide with each other even though there is no harmony. The contradictions that arise because they look at the same world and evaluate them differently are coexisting, and the force from colliding has become the reality at the same time. So that's the reality that we have, and that could be the power of contemporaneity. So we need to understand the characteristics of the contemporaneity, and we need to have a really proactive attitude to predict the future. It is necessary to understand the characteristics of these contemporary times and have a positive attitude to forecast the future from the present full of contradiction. This is also an attitude against presentism to sustain the ideal present. On the other hand, the reflection of Boris Groys, who understood the present as an intermediate time when real life unfolds, is useful for understanding the meaning of contemporaneity. Groys pays attention to the present moment when critically rethinking the historic narratives of modernism, full of plans of progress and development. While he describes the characteristics of modernism with a desire to suppress the present in the name of realizing a glorious future, he understands the concurrent period as a potentially infinite delay. So Groys explained that his current doubts by referring to what Kierkegaard said about the Jesus' contemporaneity. Jesus' contemporaneity were the time when he hesitated to accept him as Messiah, and that Christianity could only be accepted after he died. Groys noted that we are at a point of analyzing and rethinking rather than giving up or rejecting modern project. We're faced with the promise of a clear future that is no longer convincing. The present is no longer a link from the present to the future. Rather, it is a point where both the present and the future are constantly rewritten. Therefore, our present is reproducing itself rather than going toward the future. But from a modern point of view, this accumulated time that does not lead us to the future is regarded as a simply lost time. However, this unpredictable, unhistorical, and irresistibly consumed time is a time that proves our lives purely within the time, beyond the framework of modern political and economical valuation. And it is interesting to note that this academic discussion of the contemporaneity that has recently unfolded, while critically looking at the historicalized modernity, is very closely related to explaining our daily experiences with the changes caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It is time to face the contemporary reality where fleeting daily life is repeated in the present, and where a predictable future cannot be guaranteed, and a positive attitude to forecast the future is needed. And what is the contemporaneity of art in the period of COVID-19 pandemic, where the norms of the past cannot predict the future? The contemporary reality that Boris mentions, with the characteristics of doubt, hesitation, uncertainty, and indetermination, is a repetitive daily life. In other words, it is a time delayed by withholding decisions and actions in order to analyze and reflect on the reality that is experienced every day. This delay is associated with inability to prioritize values for what should remain in history. This includes the reservation of decisions about the object to be recorded as art. In the modern development-oriented perspective, the trajectory that proved successful, the development was emphasized. On the contrary, at the same time, it finds positive power in the confusion of inferior and conflicting elements that are considered inefficient by modern standards and not worth the record. So we need the resilience of art based on an open, creative thinking. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that people experience emotional isolation, and we have a limitation in communicating with technical media and art. So how will you create and experience art in the future? This is a very important question for us to answer. The existing way in which it was essential to experience a work of art at the museum or gallery is an invalid reality. Already, due to the development of digital technology, the form of art that escape the constraints of time and space have been developed, and a productive and positive alternative can be found. However, at the time when the existing artistic activities are fatally disturbed and delayed in the period of the pandemic, we need to think about what to reflect and what to recover during this period of pause. Contemporary art that emphasized the aesthetic value while pursuing the aesthetic of the nobility, the artwork varied in the highly specialized and autonomous art areas can be separated from experiences of contemporaneity. This is because through art creation and experience, we can gain the power to face and break through uncertainty in times of isolation, conflict, and anxiety. So, essential feature of contemporary art is to seek the possibility of new creation by embracing different domains and thoughts with an open attitude to various positions that coexist while colliding. Now it is impossible to define art as a modern concept that seeks aesthetic values completed by a genius artist, and the public admires and experiences them. The power of creation, which is the natural ability of humans, is universally shared and is not limited to a specific art genre. Art cannot be limited to the experiences of modern masterpieces. And it is also a time when the spirit of Dada, who advocated the anti-art, rebelling against the rational tradition after World War I 100 years ago, is awakened. Art should expand creative thinking based on respect and understanding of other domains. And what kind of art do we need in this current era? It's the form of art that can unleash the creation and the new creativity and imagination. So it is necessary to highly train and open up the free way of objectively knowing our existence in the real life and environment that we experience every day. So the creative communication and interdisciplinary communication is very much highlighted in this era. It is important than ever before for art to communicate creatively and actively with many different fields. The artistic attitude is also important in understanding the world within a relationship, moving away from the self-centered perspective through understanding the difference. Rather than following the existing method, experimental challenges are expected, such as seeking a method of fusion between areas that embrace collaboration with other people among the individual creation. So that new understanding of art required in the contemporary era will bring changes to the art experience and the way of education as well. As a consumer or the user of the artwork, the viewer can break away from the passively experiencing the work of art, and they can play an active role as an interdependent subject participating in the creation. Many changes are expected in the way art is taught within a new perspective. Through the creation of understanding various positions of experiencing the same problem in here and now, revealing the phenomena of isolation and conflict, seeking ways to overcome and communicate with each other through various methods of confronting and solving current problems. So, having this attitude of artistic thinking and creation in the uncertain times of the present, whether it is difficult to predict what tomorrow will be very important for us to live through this period. So, it is more than ever necessary to respect the differences, and we can unleash the creativity by doing so. So, that's the role that art can play. Through this open forms of art, we will not only survive throughout this chaos, we can create the win-win, the synergy effects, and dynamically leading the future. So all the discussions that we will be having today, I believe, are not merely about the survival strategies. It's more about that the ways that ways that will help us thrive in the future, that will help us heal the wounds, and that will help us move on to the next step. So this concludes my keynote presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Kim. And yeah, thank you for the clap as well. So what the Professor Kim just said is that how we should understand the current COVID-19 pandemic with what kind of language and how we should interpret them. So that was a very good presentation for us to have an opportunity to reflect upon the meaning of COVID-19. Initially, we thought and we focused more on that the end of termination of the COVID-19, but things have virus infection have persisted for some time, and so where are we headed? So it's been a while, and so it has become like a part of our life. So now we have to take a bit of different approach. So evolution and development and the speed has been the norm for the past development, but that will not guarantee us the success in the future. So that is also shaking the current present that we live. So in the time of uncertainty and instability, so we have to face that uncertainty, and that's the role that artists are required to play in this period of precarity and uncertainty and instability. So only when we face this uncertainty that we can have solidarity and work with each other. So that's the direction that Professor Kim has shown us. And that keynote presentation will be the theme that will be discussed by the discussants now. So now I would like to invite the Kang Na-kyung to make the discussion.
Hello everyone, I am Kang Na-kyung from Setangnam. COVID-19 is transforming all sectors of society, and the art world is not an exception. As you may know very well, public museums and art museums have been closed, and art fairs and biennales, both at home and abroad, have been cancelled or postponed. We live in uncertainties where no one can predict the future. Quite a lot of artists and planners working as freelancers and creators, as well as venue operators. And the COVID-19 situation is causing fundamental concerns about individual livelihoods and sustainability of creativity. In July, Korea Culture and Tourism Institute published a report, Impact of COVID-19 on Art and Culture Industry and Future Tasks, and the damages of visual art industry from COVID-19 are estimated to be 66 billion won. And many people are facing crises and difficulties. And then the public exhibitions are the closed or temporarily run. The same is true to private exhibition halls as well, because they can choose to shut down voluntarily. So nobody can predict the future now. Early this year, we thought that a treatment vaccines would be developed in a couple of months, so that there was a hope that we will get back to the normal. But since the outbreak of last November and almost 11 months have passed and there is no more future, so that we are going to see more cases like COVID-19 pandemic due to climate changes. So that's why we need to look more carefully into the present, exchanging and communicating with each other. In April, Deputy Director of Korea CDC said that the world we knew before COVID-19 will never come back. We live in totally different world. And this is a well representation of what's going on in the post-COVID pandemic era. So the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting the whole world, including politics, economy, society, culture, and ecological environment. Even before COVID-19, creative spaces faced challenges regarding venue operation. Situations may differ from space to space, but mostly difficulties were regarding budgets for venue operation and human resources. COVID-19 only exacerbated already existing problems. Despite the challenges, however, artists and planners never stopped creative activities. Channels only have been changed from offline to online, and yet artists continue their creative activities while exploring new ways of contacts or connections with the public. Alternative spaces can more flexibly respond to the changes of site. Not just me. Setangnaum is operated not just by me and also by four the planners. It's an exhibition space remodeled from a detached house in Jeju Island. It was very tiny space located at one side of art magazine publisher and relocated this year. We faced COVID-19 outbreaks as soon as it was opened, and we gathered various ideas, made various attempts to make breakthroughs. This space now is operated without people. So when we have inquiries via phone calls or Kakao Talk, we share door lock passwords to let them enter. And visitors write their names by themselves in visitors log and check their body temperatures. Most visitors have shown a very high level of awareness about COVID-19 pandemic prevention and safety. Because visitors make entries in the visitors log, so the mismatches in the records of those who have made reservations and the actual visitors are very rare. If they cannot come, they notify us in advance. Our exhibitions are taking place every 2 weeks, and we are visited by around 4 to 10 people a day. Visitors become the owner of the house and guests of the exhibition hall, where they can appreciate the exhibition and have a dialogue with other visitors and even read books before they leave. During the pandemic, it becomes a place where visitors can freely enjoy their time in a space other than their homes. Since this is unmanned operation, visitors do not have to contact others unnecessarily, and artists could exhibit their creative works on schedule without cancellation or postponement. It is time to think about the roles of alternative space played so far. The functions of alternative spaces, providing opportunities for new artists to present their works to the audience, are still valid during the pandemic. Now is the time that we need to be more proactive, providing chances to many artists who have nowhere to go. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the government has come up with various projects to support art industry. However, it's not satisfactory. The government designed various projects such as online platform projects to overcome the limitations of face-to-face activities. Creators and support groups are also receiving disaster emergency texts along with text messages encouraging them to participate in government support projects. Most of these support projects begin the process in September and they end the operation in December. In fact, they are very necessary in the field, but but it is not easy for the artists or the operation groups to make decisions to participate in the projects. Or they didn't have enough time to think about this. These projects have been designed to address problems, but they do not reflect the reality in the field. A while ago, I viewed 2020 Asia exhibition of the National Museum of Modern Art via YouTube. It was kindly explained by a curator in the form of a high-definition video, which helped me understand a lot. Since I live in other regions, it's not easy for me to visit exhibitions taking place in Seoul metropolitan areas, and now I can view the exhibition without physical movement and without any time constraint. On the other hand, however, I felt emptiness in terms of presence. When we visit an exhibition, it does not necessarily mean appreciation of creative works only. It is important to appreciate works, but the entire process, like the way to the exhibition hall, overall atmosphere, and the emotions of exhibition halls and environmental elements involving other visitors are missing. These all need to be combined to make this experience more special. It is time that artists and alternative spaces can display their characteristics and flexibilities. We need to make efforts not to lose speciality. The government should not stop its efforts providing only financial support through support projects, but also they need to listen to the voices of the field through opportunities like today's forum and then come up with longer term and practical measures. Thank you. We heard of the two presentations and they stick to the time sharply. So if we go on like this, so we need to go on like this. And Kang Na-young made very important points of two. Public museums and art museums were shut down and temporarily opened this year. And they face lots of difficulties, and alternative spaces are generating new publicity amid this crisis, which is very important, I think. And also, the government is actively supporting art and culture industry, but they do not consider the situations of artists and operation venues enough. So there is a gap between government plans and the reality. That's why she said that the government should listen more carefully to what's going on in the field. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Seo Sang-ho to make a discussion. Good afternoon, everyone. So the way we proceed, and I think we're all having a very academic discussion, so that's somewhat unfamiliar to me. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Ever since the annual conference of the AASN, I have attended the every single annual conference. And when we started the and established the AASN, so since the ACC was established, that ACC is hosting that this annual conference. But before that, the organization that I'm representing used to be hosting this annual conference. So 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine that we'll be having the 10th annual conference like this through the webinar. So this is broadcast through the YouTube, right? So Xiangli Lai, the president of Seed Lab, and all the global participants, it's nice to see you and thanks for joining us. So if you have anything to tell me, that you can leave the message in the chat box on YouTube. I wish I could have a face-to-face interaction with you, but because of the COVID-19 that we're having this online webinar. So we're in the same time, but in the different reasons that you all have the same thought how we should deal with the current situation. And I could read out the paper in English, but I'm sure that interpretation is available. That interpreter will be doing a better job in delivering the English version. So I'm the president of this alternative space, open space pair, and everyone has different characteristics and tastes. So what I'm going to share might be a bit vague. In Korea, we have many different organizations, and in other parts of Asia, I'm sure that there are many different organizations with different features and characters and characteristics. And I was able to predict that we're going to have the 10th annual conference as the webinar. So it's a bit unilateral. Not we are not having the interactive in communication. So I wish it will be really comforting that if we were able to see face to face and hold each other's hands. But I'm sure that in the near future that we will be able to do that. When we communicate with the other regions of the world, that we have been thinking about the local to local features and the online conferencing, and these concept was quite familiar to the artists like us. So we used to have the online webinar using the Zoom or YouTube or the Teams. So yeah, we're just drinking, but not in the same space, but through the both virtual format to continue that networking and continue the relationship. And in Korea, we also have many different art spaces, and in Gwangju, there are several. And you see, there are many experts and professionals who are doing a great job, who are not on the front line. And even in Gwangju, there are many different artists who are doing and using this not on tech or using the hybrid of face-to-face and on-tech medium. And in the private sector, that is, there is a more the on-tech communications being taking place. The contents and the characteristics of the space are being shared through online and being archived online. And their existence and I'm sure will be highlighted more and more in the future. And in Korea, the public institutions and the private institutions all have different situations. In other countries, that you see the private organizations led the movement, but yes, we have a new normal since the outbreak of the COVID-19. The international cooperation, that term itself is a bit old-fashioned. But in Korea, we still use that term, that international cooperation. So networking and social networking, that this word itself can, so networking can take place when the both sides have the same interest, and the communication can take place when they feel that they're connected with each other. So I'm sure that there will be more and more communication taking place, and unnecessary networking will be eliminated. So probably next year and year after next year, people say that no one can predict the future, but I think that this form of communicating and promoting that international cooperation is better. Artists, it's not being led by the artists and the public institutions. It's open to the public, so anyone can access what's available on YouTube or online, and they can have a communication with the artists themselves. So I believe that this will turn the crisis into an opportunity. So that is the end of my discussion. I hope to see you in person in the near future. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sao. Yes, I will try to be not really as theoretical and scholastic. So listening to your presentation discussion, I felt I was a little bit touched. The reason that we're having a communication like this is that we're having the pandemic, and the communication and the exchanges that we have, and what are the fundamentals of the communication that we have are also highlighted in your presentations. The networkings of that are promoted by the private institutions, that was mentioned by you, and that will become a more important medium for the future. And what I believe was important was that the art was regarded as the forms that is a bit static and the regular forms, but so even if we have to pause and slow down a bit, so we need something that will help us to have a really in-depth discussion that will solidify our future. So thank you very much.
And next panel discussant is Iminja. Hello, everyone. So I'm not really sure whether people in Taiwan are watching, as I'd like to say hello to those people in Taiwan. Hi over there. So the producers that we watched earlier, I met them on site. So it was my pleasure to meet them online. I wish to have the opportunity to meet them face to face. But anyway, today I'd like to talk about the era of infection, what nature is asking human beings. The title is grand, but I just want to talk about what's going on at this moment. Since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, the performances were still going on even with the outbreak of COVID-19. So visitors had their body temperatures checked, and we adhered to social distancing rules. So the performances continued to be staged right after the COVID-19 pandemic. And we thought about new order coming. something different from before, because the overall landscape and circumstances were different even though we were watching performances. So I was somewhat comforted, but with the further spread of COVID-19 pandemic, suddenly an official letter was delivered to the theater saying that the theater need to maintain 2-meter distance to comply with social distancing rules. So right now we keep the distance of 1 meter, but sticking with 2-meter distancing rules was very hard to comply with. So we thought we maintained social distancing guidelines appropriately. So there was a strong outcry against government the measures regarding a lockdown. And at the end of the day, many theaters were forced to close and shut down. But still, there was a discourse that we need to continue stage performances. But some people argue that safety comes before performances. But these two issues cannot be separable. So, how to live these times and how to meet people, these are the issues we need to think about. But control and government restrictions came before we thought about how to proceed with. So, today's forum is going to be a great opportunity to think about the performance and art and culture, the activities amid the pandemic crisis, and hopefully, I wish that we could have more opportunities like this. Many people argue that show must be open, show must be continued. But if the circumstances are not safe, we know that performances can be stopped. But if performances are stopped under control or restrictions, I think that performances should go on. So I hope that we need to have more discussions regarding this matter. I'm not really sure how well you know about the structure of theater. So what I'm saying is that um, the the actors and the audiences are using different areas even though they are put in the same theater. So their areas are separated from each other. The reason why I'm saying this is that because many people are concerned about the possible infections in theater. So discourse over the show must go on, still continues, and theaters made decision to be reopened. And in August, there was very serious resurgence of COVID-19 pandemic, and actually actors were infected and some practice rooms needed to be shut down. So there was a confusion about what's right and what's wrong. About new encounter, we know that we need to meet, but we need to think about safety. I submitted this paper very late, so I was urged by staff members of this forum, and when I got the phone call, I was on a train. I was involved in theater, so I didn't do much of shooting or filming, but due to COVID-19 pandemic, I was busy with shooting process, and I got the phone call from the forum organizer when I was on train. Because we need to explore different means of art And of course, there are some concerns whether I could have the real encounter in these new ways.
저는 이런 코로나 상황을 우리 인간에게 다른 방식으로 살아가라고 이야기하는
I
것
think
같습니다.
COVID-19 pandemic situation telling us human beings to explore different ways of life.
뿐만이 아니라 우리 삶도 다르게
It is
살아가는
applied
것을
not just to art but also to our daily lives as human beings.
인간 세계에 다른 방식으로 사고하고 다른 방식으로 감각하는 것을 늘 이야기해왔다고
So art
생각해요.
always keeps telling us different ways of thinking and different ways of life. So I think certain questions can be raised by art even during the pandemic crisis. In this regard, I think I am a very lazy artist.
주어진 질서 안에서 어떻게 새롭게 할 것인가는 고민을 하기
Making anew
그 질서를 어떻게 새롭게 갈
in the
것인가
existing order
고민을 해야 함에도 많이 하고 있지 못하는 그런
it's not easy, but this is different different time of making different orders. That's why I'm saying that I'm very a lazy artist during this COVID-19 era.
저는 우리 스스로가 다른 인류가 되어야 된다고
I think that we need to make changes as human beings.
아마 다들 하시겠지만
You may think what kind of creations we need, and we need to continue to think about that, about what we are creating and what we will create.
보지 않으면
There are many fundamental issues we need to think about, otherwise, our future will be totally different than now.
이런 만남의 방식이 되게 많이 익숙해져 가고 있거든요.
And I am already familiar with this kind of encounter with people, but I do not want to be familiarized more. I feel more comfortable. I do not have to go to Seoul. I can make a conversation via Zoom or online applications. I am getting more accustomed to this way, but still, I yearn for meeting people face to face. Okay, that is the end of my talk. Thank you. So theaters were closed, which was taken considered inevitably. And the pandemic prevention periods is longer than expected, and we have the concerns and thinking about how to operate theaters. And panel discussion just before said that she is lazy artist, but what should be the art for the artists? And also she said that we need to become different human beings, and likewise we need to ask lots of questions at these times. We need to gather together to have more discussions like this. Thank you very much for your talk.
Now I would like to Im Jong-un to make the discussion. Good afternoon, I'm Im Jong-un. It's very good to see you, whether you have traveled far away or you just came from a nearby. That we now realize because the theater shut down and the gallery shut down, that we realize that the art has taken place based on the space itself. And I believe that artistic practices can take place only on the space basis. So I would like to share that what I have learned throughout the process and the role of curator and my role of the curator can also be revisited. So exhibitions have called off, and we cannot guarantee that when the next exhibition will take place. We need a whole new approach at a time like this, and we all know that, so we're seeking a new ways to exhibit the artwork. So within the guidelines that we were given on social distancing, that we're finding a new ways. So for example, that we're finding the alternative spaces like the digital format and the virtual space. So in a place that are not the gallery or the museum, that we can seek a new ways of interacting with the audiences and the visitors. So in a new place, that various contents can be combined and the various methods can be combined together to communicate. So after the COVID-19, that within the restrictions and the guidelines that we have on the social distancing, that we can have an interaction. And in Korea, so we are having today's webinar, and in Korea, the many are trying to find the solutions online. So if you visit the official website of the museum and the galleries of Korea, that you can see the many artworks there. So because the Korea tends to find the solutions through the digital medium, and some say that this is experiencing that what future will be like. And globally, we're sharing more and more information and knowledge online. But as mentioned by the previous speakers, that online alternative is not really satisfactory because it's in the infancy and because it lacks the physical interaction that we can have with the audiences when they visit the museum or the galleries. Can online absolutely replace that kind of experience? That is questionable because now the space itself is a replace, that we have to ask a fundamental question as well. So what can art do for the people in this post-pandemic era? It will be great to create the contents that is dedicated for the online exhibitions, but there is also a need for us to think about the alternative as well. So in reality, we're seeking a new spaces and in the neighborhood. So we have to find new ways of interacting with the people in the neighborhood. So we can find the new elements in the neighborhood and we can practice our artistic practices there. And anyway, so things have been slowed down, so that will give us an opportunity for us to have a whole new approach for art as well. So if you move on to the next slide. So this is where we do the exhibition. This is the subway station for line 5, the Yeongdeungpo, the market station. So that the regeneration for this subway station has been quite successful. And there are some artworks displayed at the station. And the interaction with the visitor is quite active at the station. So the gallery space, and there is also the space for workshop, and I'm doing the curating job for that station. So the space is like this. This is a subway station, so it's the public space. But if you look at this space, it's an exhibition. So next station is the forest, the in-between forest. And the next station that you can dream about the nature. So the 8 artists and 1 programmer collaborated for this exhibition. So the theme is the urban forest. And I'm also part of this exhibition. I'm recruiting the artist and curating the artworks. And this is the work by the artist Yu Young-il. And he's talking about how we are linearly consuming the artworks. And this is a work by the Bang Mira. So they live in Mulledong or the Yeongdeungpo, and they're researching that neighborhood and use that inspiration from the neighborhood when they create the artworks. And so these artists added the imagination and the images collected from the actual neighborhood. And it's a cafe within the subway station. So even for the window or the small spaces that we put up the drawings made by the artist. So it's a space that people can enjoy art when passing by. So it will be even better if I can provide a really fancy place to display their artworks. But even if all the museums and the galleries shut down, the subway stations are open to the public. So that's why we organized this types of the exhibition space for the subway station. So next. And here is the space that I mentioned about the workshop. It's a creative hem. And this artist has a studio in the neighborhood. So within the spear-shaped earth that we live in, the square-shaped space, and people really love this space. And next slide. You see that we're living in the era of COVID-19, that we miss traveling and we miss nature. And this is the promotional leaflet, and it's a postcard, and it looked like a very old painting. So old photographs that make us to think about what we miss about the past. So we're not just distributing the postcards. So there are some who were not able to visit this exhibition space. So we also invite people online. If we have the internet connection, can you connect through the link that I put at the bottom of the slide? So we made a leaflet. Okay, so its internet connection is not good, so I will just explain. So it has more elaborated information. So there are multiple artists, and if you scroll down, every month that we have different artists. And the paper book, once it's printed, it's done. But this online digital book is something different, that we can add new details every month. So this exhibition itself is being implemented online, and we created for the publicity as well. The online space used to be utilized just as the digital archive, but now we use the online format as the medium to publicize and to promote the events like that. So this is the digital leaflet that we created. And the drawings made by the artist. So some of the visitors might want to draw by themselves. So we gave them the opportunity to draw with the colored pencils. So they can take a seat in between the galleries and they can make the drawings of their own, or they might want to bring that, or they can scan that QR code and they can make their own drawing in the space they wanted. And if they would like to have more information, they can use this QR code as well. So that we have this on both online and offline, complementing the contents on both sides. So this is what we do at the workshop. And when people post on social media, that we give them some benefits as well. So we hope that we can make them feel connected more through the events like this. So in the everyday life space that we are having this exhibition, it's not just that. And in Yeongdeungpo neighborhood, there are many private and public spaces and many artists. And we have a artist space, a network within our neighborhood. So Yeongdeungpo network, there were art fairs, and it's difficult for ordinary people to visit the art space. But during these festivals or events like that, the people can visit the art studios of the artists, utilizing the both offline and online formats. And here you see the balloon and you see the chimney. So this is the base points. People can make a visit to this base points. So in the neighborhood, this is the studio for the artist. And we put up a sign that this is an open space and the artists sell their artworks. And we also provide a counseling opportunity as well. And Union Art Fair and other events are also being held in the neighborhood so that the many different resources and the artists can work with each other and get energized as well. There are some of the artists who are doing the performing art on the street or on the roof. Then people can watch from afar. Yes, online performance will be great, but it will be even better if you can see the performance in a small alley like this. So in the neighborhood, there are artists living there and working there. Their creation and their work can collaborate and can promote solidarity with the citizens in the neighborhood. And in the globalized the art format and some art formats in the certain areas were considered advanced, so that was the reality that we had, but with the critical perspective that we can freely enjoy the new forms of art, that we can go over the concept of the periphery to embrace the new forms of art, that are new local forms of art, so we can make it more enriching. Ironically, it's a difficult time, and the speed of globalization has been put to a halt. And during this pandemic era, we need the new methodology for the artist, and we can find the new opportunity to practice the new forms of artworks. And in this new environment, the localities can be reconnected with the artist. And those of you who are continuing this networking and collaboration, I hope that more will be coming out from the collaboration like that. Thank you. So that was a quite specific cases shared by Im Jong-un. Yes, of course, that we have a COVID-19 pandemic and not on tech and online, the virtual interaction. So that's automatic, the thought that we have when we think about the COVID-19 pandemic. But Im Jong-un mentioned that how we can sustain the locality or the space that we have in offline. So that was a quite critical and quite radical concept proposed. And lastly, she mentioned that the speed of globalization has slowed down a bit, and we can deglobalize and focus more on the locality and the periphery of the art ramp. So we can break away from the hierarchy that has been set in the artistic world. So that was somewhat correlated with what Seo Sang-ho mentioned. So not within the level of the nation or the globality that we can reconnect with the locality that we have. So for that we will have more discussion in the general discussion session.
And now we'd like to move on to the last panel discussant, Jang Young-ju. Hello everyone, my name is Jang Young-ju. I am an artist and the author. I'm occupying art spaces themselves, so I like to raise questions regarding the occupation and the use of art space. The online and offline markets, such as department stores and supermarkets, when there is no storage warehouses and online distribution networks, they are the mere junk space. Graphics, photography, visuals, and sound, motion, communication, and technologies are used to create a traditional exhibition environment. Here, the exhibition halls are just like malls facing crisis with the spread of smartphones. Big events outside under these circumstances usually reveal the internal crisis very clearly. Audience is renting out time and space via smart device screen. Artists also, instead of settling creative works in space, occupy exhibition halls temporarily and then they look into the space together with the visitors. Let's go back to the sometime long ago. Have you ever been to Ulsan? If we look into there is a big cliff and there is observatory across the river. With naked eyes, we cannot see the paintings. But using smartphones, we can appreciate artworks via smartphones. But it's like looking at the art paintings on the wall using telescope. So what I'm trying to say is that we have had crises always. Crisis has always been there. And art in an exhibition hall is a tactical behavior among the participants. Of course, art space cannot be encompassed under one concept due to individuality. Artistic activities in a space are all heterogeneous. However, given the usage of exhibition space, they can become targets of utility providing exhibition services. In terms of supply and demand of art space, demand generally refers to the desire or amount that consumers want over a certain period of time. Supply means the desire or amount that producer or supplier wants to sell or supply. Given the art space is supply and participants are demand, demand is not represented only by willingness to visit, but by effective demand for appreciating or purchasing creative works. Supply means both willingness to supply as well as actual capability to supply. So it's not that anybody can become a supplier of art space. Therefore, looking into operation of individual art space can serve as indicators for identifying current situations. I have been searching for new spaces and introduced them on mobile devices. New spaces are just like the art museums, but the only difference is that it is more likely that new spaces are run by artists and there is more meaning of occupation rather than ownership. That is the only difference. So new spaces are just like the first generation alternative spaces designed to expand exhibition opportunities for female artists. And there is a similar space located in Yeongdeungpo, named Project Space 영등포 and 연무지개 and 해골 in Chungju. And they are playing the role of enhancing community cultural environment. They also include exhibition space under the government support system. It is rather complex concept of exhibition space where profit is not the only purpose, but they do not reject profit. Exhibition activities need land, sites, and buildings. Use of land is use of space, unlike general goods. Not only ground space, but also underground and airspace can also be subject to utilization as shown in the subways. So land in the context of art space means multidimensional space. Land is permanent unless we recreate the earth, so it has the value of space. Because of its perpetual features, long-term use of space is possible and lease market is developed. As I told you earlier, new spaces are occupied temporarily in the form of renting out. If space is owned, labeling would be important. However, this focuses on occupying rather than ownership, therefore focusing more on exhibition activities within the space. Out of several examples, one producer staged a theater entitled Water, Earth, and Fire. This theater play was staged in the form of Zoom online. The producer telling the stories, and they need to exercise, and they need to have exercise room to practice the performance. Because we live in the pandemic crisis, it was very hard for them to search for exercise room. And at the end of the day, this performance was staged, but there was extremely small audience. But it was opened successfully, fortunately. I was engaged in the play directly. And I was also involved in the collective roles to improve exhibitions, looking for the spaces and planning and making posters and leaflets by ourselves. Because we live in untact era, so we have dialogue with these colleagues only in the form of Zoom. And I hope that we will meet face to face in December. So I myself am going through the difficulties at the times of untact. Space cannot be moved, but think differently. Depending on the social economic environment, the relevant location of space can change with the changes of population and transportation system or other environmental circumstances. So even if it is the same exhibition space, the feelings that exhibition halls have may be different depending on where it belongs. So even if the online exhibition is reproduced in the same high-quality image, the impression is different depending on the location and environment where I belong. So these are the same awareness of problem. regardless of whether they are offline and online. Rather, crisis seems to reveal the problem more sharply. The width of art is wider and deeper than general. Then we need to think about, as a response, what we can build, how to build a structural system that allows visitors to interact with creative works. Just because the market is bad does not mean that the value of art decreases, and just because the market economy is booming does not mean that the value of art rises. A supply of space takes time, so the change may occur later. So, depending on the attitude of artists toward audience and space, the value of art may change. So, even though they are occupying, not owning, they even though they are occupying exhibition spaces, they need to continue to enhance artistic values. And lastly, as I told you earlier, the peaks and troughs of art are greater than in general. So take an example of an area. So there is a PPT file. Can you please open the slide? So we are here in Gwangju, but I'd like to cite an example of Cheongju. So next time, I'd like to cite an example of Gwangju. So this is Cheongju. In the 1980s and 1990s, galleries were created leading local art. Along with galleries, local art was developed from local associations and communities, and private art museums were built from the 2000s. Through the exhibitions, promising Korean artists were introduced, and a contest for new artists was held. Private art museums replaced public art museums at that time. In 2000, in Seoul, there was a creative studio called Samji Space. The form of Samji Space as creative studio began to spread from that time. And then the government residence support project was launched in Cheongju. Alternative spaces and residency combined spaces were formed voluntarily. In 2007, Cheongju Art Creative Studio was established, and the warehouse was renovated from an old tobacco factory, which was the venue for 2011 Cheongju Craft Biennale. And then in 2018, the National Museum of Modern Art, Cheongju, was established as art institution in Cheongju. Most of the alternative spaces and private residencies downsized or closed. There is a space that holds exhibitions that do not receive subsidies from public funds. And the space run by cultural planners in their 20s, interested in local culture through small-scale activities such as Room 122. So looking at the process of spaces being created and disappearing can help us understand the past and the future. When space is sorted by timeline, the space and body can be divided and served as one indicator. As the American poet and feminist Adrienne Rich said, spaces are the locations where you can see multiple bodies from different countries, culture, race, class, gender, and religions. The latest art spaces look for ways to develop themselves without separating body from space. They reveal their limitations and strengths while presenting a new topographic map. If we continue to pay attention to the newly created spaces from the past, then we can see art is evolving even in difficult times. Art activities refer to various activities that humans develop for art. There are public entities and private entities, and the art activities are conducted by various actors. Space is consumption material as well as production material. It's where audiences and space operators, where supply and demand are adjusted to allocate resources appropriately. And considering that how temporary occupiers are causing chaos in the space, both inside and outside the exhibition hall, then I think that the chaotic point would be the prospect and challenge we need to look forward to. Thank you. The title of this presentation is the definition of art spaces and the transformation history centering on the new space. So when we talk about art space is where the artworks can be created over buildings. But what Chang Young-ju is saying is that it is broader in concept. It embodies the artist, encompasses spirits. The space is not separate. They exist in the context of other factors, including politics, economy, and society. So about the questions on the space and the venue in the pandemic era, these are the questions raised by Chang Young-jo. This is my understanding. So we have heard of one keynote presentation followed by 5 panel discussion talks. So we do not have enough time to raise questions to each and every one, and we are supposed to end this forum by 5 o'clock. This is what I was told from the organizer, so I think we have enough time for discussions. So maybe some points may have been missing, or there may be some areas where you want to talk more among the discussants. So for the remaining time, I'd like to use these to have more discussions among the presenter and discussants. And also I'd like to share some time to hear the feedbacks or comments from the audience watching this online. So if you have any questions, you can ask them using chatting room. I'm not going to designate anybody, so you can have free discussions among yourselves. So which one would come first? So I count it 3 seconds, and then if there is no talk, then of course, so we will start with Kim.
Yeah, just to break the silence, I have a question. From the morning that we had a session led by C-Lab, and the discussion that took place online was quite interesting. And the theme that were discussed were about the experiences that we all have across the world, that global pandemic and the impact of global pandemic on the artistic world. And it could be the artists, and it could be the galleries and the museum and the artistic institutions. So those with really the affection for love we're discussing the ways forward for the art. So that's what we're discussing today. And I'm a professor teaching students at school. So rather than sharing the viewpoint of the artist on the ground, that I deliver the scholatical, the theory. So I think it's a time for us to redefine the concept of art. So I think it will be good to have a discussion on how we can redefine the concept of art. And I've studied the modernism mainly, and I've also covered the definition of contemporaneity in my presentation as well. So modernism has been defined by the framework that we had, the conventional framework. So that used to be the framework that made us feel relieved. But over the past 2 decades or the 3 decades, so there were the economical, social, and the political, the changes, and also the changes that took place in nature. That type of framework can no longer be sustained. So since we're talking about the virus infection, we also have to think about the overall ecosystem, and we also have to think about the institutions and the regimes that we develop for us to coexist on this earth. So it's a really wide concept, and I'm a professor teaching at school, and I'm teaching art at school. So I'm nurturing the future generation of artists. So through the exhibitions and through the galleries and through the network of the artists, that you do the communicating with the other artists, and that I believe is the essence, is the true form of education, a true form of teaching. And through solidarities, that we can create the public discussion. So it's a shared form of change that we need to lead. So we have authors and the artists and the writers and the planners here. So I would like to hear what's your views on the definition of art. So what I wanted to deliver through my presentation was that we need to collaborate more with the other discipline. So we need to have a more interdisciplinary collaboration so that we can have better sensational artworks. Yes, that's also a good forms that amuse our eyes and amuse our sensations. But there are many students who do not major in art, and you do not know that what the students' potential will be. So the literature, the science, and the math, when students are studying the disciplines, so it could be the agriculture, or it could be some discipline that we think is has nothing to do with the art, or it could be the law. Then how the artistic thinking can help us recover and be resilient in the face of crisis. So that's what I would really like to emphasize here. So I've been really uh, touching around the bushes, but that's the main point that I would like to deliver. So hopefully, if you can share what you think about what I said, that would be great. So yes, Professor Kim, that you gave us something to have a discussion on. So the other discussion, if you have any thoughts on what the professor said. So what to teach and what art is, that's really tough for me to consider. But I'm also instructor teaching students at the university. And this year and last semester, and I thought that how we can teach art to the students, and that had become the very vivid for us, and that had become some abstract concept as well. So yes, that's what we have been experiencing over the year. So when we move forward, we need to have a new paradigm for the concept of art. So in the real time, the class or when I had online classes with the students, that's what I felt. So when we teach art through online, I thought that what will really be left in the minds of students. So somehow we can expand the realm of teaching when we are teaching art through the online formats to the students. So that's what I've been thinking over the 2 semesters while teaching the students. How about others? Other discussions? Any idea?
In May, our space involves some students from Jeju Island. They organized the exhibition, so they got the stories online and they turned them into exhibition activities. People in the 20s and even younger generations are the media or online generations. So, as mentioned earlier, they did not learn art directly, but they can express their thinking in the form of art, in the form of languages or drawings or through other media. Some people have artistic power even though they are not artists, and artists can work together with them, and other participants can broaden their thinking. So we heard of example of Yeongdeungpo case, and the citizens of Yeongdeungpo, they encountered artworks in subway stations. And we are trying to have that sort of exhibition activities more, because conventionally when we had art it was like going to the art museums, but now we are talking about daily art, so we can encounter art and creative works in our daily spaces. And the current crisis can serve as an opportunity to for us to get more accustomed to this type of exhibition. Some artists are collaborating with the general public to broaden their creativity areas. For me, pandemic has not come suddenly. They were just not visible, and now they are visible suddenly. So in terms of relations, so it is a kind of reminder that we need to think about relations. There is the convention regarding creativity environment in the UK, and they are considering about safe environment. But it is not only talking about pandemic situations, it is about taking a new perspective regarding the human relations or the hierarchical order. When we learn art, there are some violent hierarchies. So I think that the ways of learning art was somewhat incorrect, and that was applied to me as well, because there are things that remained invisible, and I think this is an opportunity for us to learn new things that have been invisible so far in the form of art. So in this regard, I think we need to redefine art. So I am here with this forum, and when we organize a performance, it's a process of making promises. Let's say there is an actor A and B, and when they have a dialogue, we keep practicing how they need to meet with each other, and these promises should not be broken on the stage, because if the promises are broken, that means accident on the theater stage, because theater is all about promises, which is a strictly controlled environment. But because of the restrictions of this the pandemic crisis, the control imposed on the theater is very violent, I think. So what I mean by new humankind represents the freedom of art and the acknowledgement of the existence of beings. So when it comes to art education or a new type of art, there are things that have not been recognized before, or that have been ignored so far, that have not been dignified by human beings. It is time to turn them into something respectful. Thank you very much. So there are many important talks going on right now. So what about Sang-woo or Jang Young-ju?
I was thinking about something else. I've been thinking about something else. So anything you would like to share with us? Yes. What will be the future direction for this annual conference? That's what I've been thinking. So anyway, the alternative space and non-profit space for artists. So it's based on the space, and it's about the teaching the future generation of the artists, and that's what we do is that it's about experiencing and exploring the things and making the failures and teaching the things that are not taught at school. So those who lead at the front, and there are many artists in Asia, and they were the director for the documentary. So we congratulate. So 10 years ago, we had a discussion on how we will survive. So I thought about those moments. So even if we have a really lengthy discussions on teaching, if we do not have a good collaboration, organic collaboration with the public institutions and the schools, we will not have a good result. And the professor from the Taiwan University, and she been teaching, and now she's back, and she has a really great influence over the Taiwanese art world. And what should I say? So here I'm wearing the mask and have a discussion here, but tonight let's get together again through Facebook.
For me, the Asian Art Space Network. So we have this in the form of forum this year. but I hope that it has the original purpose with different intentions. So I hope to revitalize the original intention, and in that regard, we need to make changes to education field.
If I may add, so we had the first annual conference. The students from the local university, Jeonnam University, Joseon University, students who major in art, they all came here to be part of the conference. Over 400 students joined the conference. So it was a really huge turnout we had back then. So the Asianness, I think it has to do with the locality that we have in the city of Gwangju. I do not need to mention them again and again. So a lot of contents are being out on that theme. So 10 years ago, when we established this conference and this network, it was not just meaningful, and it was a great platform for the directors of the alternative spaces that enable the collaboration with the other artists from the other nations of Asia. So Gwangju played a really great role. So how many people join us through online? So there should be the many comments being posted on the chat box on YouTube, but I've felt a bit said that there will be the over 100 institutions representing Asia, and they're gaining so much attention from across the world. And domestically, we also have the young curators and the young artists, and they're playing a really pivotal role in Korea as well. So it's not the space that remains static. It's the space that is being evolved. It's a being space and the network that is continuously flowing. I'm not sure how long this pandemic will last. So if I dare to make a suggestion for next year, if we have to have the webinar just like this year, that into 2021, I hope that just like the first conference, that we can have 3 nights and the 4 days together to have a real interaction. If we can have an offline conference. Thank you.
I believe many people would feel the same as what Seosang was saying, and Chang Youngju. Lastly, in the morning we heard of case from National Gallery Singapore, and one of them was exercise within a glitch. So glitch can be interpreted as confusion or chaos. So we need to practice at the times of chaos or confusion. Then I think this is the process of adaptation to a difference. So there are things that have been disregarded so far, but we need to expose them and think differently. So this is what I want to say. Thank you. We have been having this conversation. Any questions or comments raised so far? All right, thank you. So it's almost time to conclude the session, but actually I have one question, but it's hard for me to ask all the questions individually. But this is rare opportunity for all of us together. So I think I'd like to give you the final moment to make a comment. But I'd like to hear from you regarding venue or locations. The local and the regional community values need to re-identified. And we need to explore alternative visions in this regard. So I'd like to ask you to elaborate more on this area while making the final comment. So we'd like to start with Kim Young or the reverse. Then we will start with Chang Yongju. So we are living in the moment of crisis. And there are lots of subsidies these days, but the problem is that almost all these support projects are centered on the second half of this year, which is limitation for artists, but still we need to improve ourselves. So please pay attention to what artists are doing and the trend of this art industry as well. So I'd like to thank all the audiences using this opportunity. Thank you.
So it is not about a confined space or irresistible fate. So yeah, we have to think about the space within that framework. But as mentioned by Mr. Shaw, that we had a new space created based on the network. So that's the new form of a space that I would like to envision for the future. In a solid space that we can make a really flexible new space, and between the spaces there could be the collaboration and solidarity between the communities, and that will constitute the new space and the new place for arts, and the new artworks can come out from that new space. Thank you.
Well, everybody else is based upon visuals, but myself is based on performances. So maybe I'm telling different stories because the art is not alone in terms of creative spaces. Theater has always had limitations because we need to meet face to face, and there are always language barriers as well. So instead of extension or expansion, we have been thinking about how to meet better. Because we are living in the era of pandemic, so suddenly one-on-one encounter has been turned into one-to-many, which is totally different environment. So what existed before, because we need to make changes to the environment itself, which is really confusing to many of us. And for me, my performance is site specific. I'd like to tell the stories of people on stages. Disregard regionality, locality is reflected in my story, but we're living in the untapped era where I cannot hear the stories from the people. We can make dramas when we meet people. So it is very hard to play in the theater at these times. Because of these changes, we need to think differently, but we need to explore ways of meeting people in any form. And I hope that we can continue to meet with each other. Thank you.
Yes, mic is turned on 1 second after I turn it on. I think all the good themes were mentioned, but there's a one regrettable thing. How much people are interested in this conference? I'm not blaming anyone. That's something that we need to create. Even if you're not invited, that there were some times that we can have fun together. I think it's a good that we have a pandemic. So beginning the 11th year that we can have a new refreshed mindset for the future of the AASN's annual conference. Yes, within the art space at the institution like that, so they have the multilateral aspects, and in Indonesia there is no distinction between visual and the performing arts. And in Korea, you know that individuals are really superior, so that's why there's a distinction between the visual and the performing arts. So whether it's offline or the face-to-face or the through the webinar format or the digital the format, that if we cannot have a face-to-face interaction, that yes, we should have a digital interaction. That we have the 5G, the high-tech technologies. So it's a good opportunity for us to build a really strong network. Due to the spatial limitations and the times that we spend on the airplane, that could be saved. And if we have a good time meeting with each other through the webinar, then we can have more time together through the digital format. And hopefully next year we have more participants. And we had a really good discussion with Taiwan, Lin Ping, the president of C-Lab, Takwen, Mocha. So they were here all on so many occasions for the conference. I hope to see you soon. And Taiwan has been responding very well to the COVID-19. Yes, the Korea has been doing a good job responding to the COVID-19 as well. So hope to see you in the near future.
After the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, my hometown is Seoul, but I live in Jeju. It's been almost 5 years. And this is my first stay out other than my home since the outbreak of COVID-19. So traveling to other areas, there's always something different. For example, I've come to Gwangju from Jeju, and I can see the beautiful colors of fallen leaves in Gwangju. So this is my first opportunity to take part in the Asian Art Space Network Forum. So I really hope to meet the participants from overseas next time. So it's a pity for me I cannot meet them in person this year, but still it's my greatest pleasure to meet the participants present this year. So I hope to meet the various people either online or offline. Thank you.
So anyway, we're talking about the spatial art. So we have those who are involved in the exhibition. So that's why the spatial arts were mentioned many times. But there are the performing arts and the time arts, and the literature is also a form of art. And that's something that we have to read. So when we have a discussion on the overall art, that goes beyond the limitation of time and space. So how that will be addressed, it's uncertain for us to predict, but the art itself has a really strong power that transcends time and space. That's my personal view. And the exhibitions, yes, of course, it's a result of the artistic imaginations that is displayed and shown to people. So that is one format of art that is being discussed. But we have to go beyond that, and that's what we've been discussing today. So anyhow, that education is very, very important, and through the efforts that we put into education, that we can realize that true essence of art. And when we will be able to meet, and so what we will do, that we want the change, they unleashed in the minds and in the hearts of the viewers. So that, I think, is about the essence of art. As mentioned by Kandinsky, we're playing the piano, but the keys and the tunes that are played, it's not delivering the same message to the hearts of the listeners. So there was also the book by Kandinsky. The artists and the viewers might not have the same experience, but there could be the link that connects the artist with the viewers. It could be the misunderstanding or the same intention that the artist has can be delivered and linked with the viewers. So I think there is the power, that spiritual and the emotional power that art has, and it was mentioned by the artist Kandinsky. But we have not evolved much from 100 years ago. 100 years ago, there was a great depression. Situation is a bit different, but many things and occasions overlap. And I've also mentioned the spirit of Tada, and that spirit, I think, is relevant in modern days as well. And art, it's not just about the form. I think it's about the changing the hearts of viewers, the people who is enjoying the artwork. So that place for art could be the people. The many different media is involved, and the many different people are involved in putting up the exhibitions. But the people can change when we have the interaction, the true interaction with the artworks. So it's about the drawing and the imagining the futures by watching and interacting with the artworks. So within the imagination, there is the word image, and the image is created by the artist. And all the children have their own image within their mind. So what kind of images can be drawn? It could be the architecture or engineer or the broadcaster. So we can do the art in many different parts of the world. So we can teach art no matter what discipline or no matter what subject that we'll be studying and that we'll be doing for the future. So the changes in art and the different space for art, I think that is people. It's not just about the physical space or the physical place. People matter for art, and people matter as the place for art. So for uncertain future, I think the solution can be found in people themselves.
With this, we have heard of all the final comments of all the presenter and the panel discussions. So in the session 2 of 2020 AASN, we have been talking about art resilience for artists and by artists. So the art is important for human beings to overcome the pandemic crisis. And there are the various conditions for the art to be resilient. So the artists need to be re-energized, which will be ultimately helpful for the resilience of human beings. So hopefully there are more activities and networking and more dialogue among artists so that artists can help bring change to the future or to our society. And before we go, as I mentioned earlier, there are many camera equipment and staff members of the Asia Culture Center in front of us that have been working very hard. So thank you very much for your contribution, and also thank all the presenters and participants from overseas as well. Thank you very much. With this, I'd like to conclude this forum.